Welcome to Hash It Out, a podcast built by data security experts. We decipher the data security landscape through honest conversations about today's headlines and tomorrow's challenges. Brought to you by Virtru. Let's dive in.
What does it take to make cybersecurity a true business advantage? Virtru CMO Matt Howard sits down with Dave Brown, CISO and CIO at Andesite.ai to find out. Let's hash it out.
Good afternoon. My name is Matt Howard. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Virtru, and welcome to another edition of Hash It Out, a podcast where we talk about all things security, data security, governance, and risk management. I want to welcome a special guest today, Dave Brown. He's the CISO and CIO at Andesite.ai. Dave, welcome to the show. And if you don't mind, introduce yourself to the Hash It Out audience.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate the invite. Looking forward to chatting with you. So yeah, my name is Dave Brown. I'm with a AI SOC company called Andesite.ai. We've been around since 2023. My background actually started in the military. And in my last job in the military, I led the computer security incident response team for a 40,000 user network. Sort of got my passion for cybersecurity. Since I've left the military, I've done everything from consult for large companies, but I landed primarily after the federal government when I was at US CERT as the deputy director there in startups. Startups is really my passion. So in 2024, 2025, it's all become a blur at this point. I authored a book called The Lean CISO, Bootstrapping Cybersecurity and Startup. And what it was really sort of my blueprint for what I've learned the hard way. And I had a lot of people say, hey, I really love to learn, what is your advice? What's your guidance? And I wanted it to be small. I didn't want it to be too prescriptive because I wanted people to be able to sort of frame their own sort of strategy and approach. But anyway, it was sort of at the behest of a friend of mine and my wife who said, you should do this. And I said, you nuts. Anyway, so I did it anyway. And the feedback has been mostly positive, which I really appreciate. You'll get to learn too. They won't say why, but other than that, it's been very well received. And it was an incredibly humbling experience for anybody who's ever written a book. At Andesite, I have built the cybersecurity, the compliance, and had oversight on the entire IT build from nothing.
Yeah, it's terrific to chat. You and I had a chance to connect a couple of weeks ago and compare notes. And I know I'm dating myself, but I've been in this game a long time. I think there was a couple of things that kind of really resonated with me when we were talking and sort of just reflecting on, your book and your journey into sort of startup land and a lot of the work you're doing at Andesite right now. But the word pragmatic and business aligned are the two things that kind of came to my mind so often in my journey through this world of all things cyber. I think the pragmatic side of things doesn't quite come to the forefront. And a lot of times the idea of business value or business alignment is sort of, left aside. I'm curious to kind of get your thoughts on both of those things. What does pragmatism look like to you in your sort of worldview? And what does it mean to be business aligned as a CISO?
Yeah, so great questions. And if I don't answer them, then make me answer them. No.
I will.
When I come into an organization, the first 90 days is ultimately determining what are the business priorities and designing a cyber strategy that aligns to and supports the business as a business enabler. Too often I've heard fellow CISOs come in and say, I'm going to do a security assessment against NIST. Well, that's great. But then how does that tell the business how you're there to help them, right? More importantly, when I say pragmatic, I mean, if you don't integrate as part of the business, you will never be seen as anything other than a cost center, right? And so the importance of being able to say in the first 90 days, here's how I, as your cyber executive, align to the business priorities as a business owner, right? As a portion of the business to be able to support, whether it's a go-to-market strategy, whether it's what we did at Andesite building, what's called compliance high, whatever that is. If you don't do that, then you instantly are not going to be seen as part of the business. So to me, that's what being pragmatic, and that's what means by at least building to the business, and then more importantly, staying in alignment with the business, which means you have to pivot, right? You cannot just say, here's my strategy, here's what I'm doing, and that's it. It's not a one and done deal.
So, I mean, yeah, and I think the idea of like cyber can equal cost center or office of no, I think as it's been called many times, or cyber can equal sort of value creation engine for an organization where the CISO and the other functions within the organization are in fact aligned with this idea that look, sort of security, risk, governance is something we need to do to minimize the potential for loss of data, for being exploited. We need things like SOCs to monitor this ever-changing sort of threat landscape that's happening faster than anyone can blink. And then all of that is to say we also have to put ourselves into a situation where we have controls over data so that we can share the data, because that's oftentimes what the business demands is sharing of sensitive data with others to get things done. But how do we do all of that in a way where we're not sacrificing control and maybe sovereignty and security? And so it's a big ball of wax. I mean, as you think about that, how do you see the difference between protecting data and preventing it from being lost or stolen versus giving people agency over data and enabling the sharing of information for purposes of getting things done in the business?
Yeah, so data protection has a lot of complexity to it, and that's not a trivial task, right? So whether it's data within our SaaS environment, whether it's our business data, for instance, whatever that is, or information that we're sharing with trusted business partners. And there's at times situations where you're going to have to share sensitive information that requires extra controls and restrictions. I like to call it intellectual property protection, right?
Yep.
So the way that the program was built was ultimately to compliance high. And what that means is building to the most strict and heavily compliant industries, government, financial services, and your healthcare, right? And so that even means like Department of War with its impact level, right? And so anytime you're trying to protect control but unclassified information or federal contract information, having the ability to be able to, even if it's a DLP said, hey, this is something you should encrypt or something that you should probably not send or block it, is fundamentally important. So the short answer is like we have used Virtru specifically for intellectual property protections. We'll get flagged in an email if we're trying to send something. But in addition to that, even in our enterprise, like what we work in for documents, email and all that, it is a FedRAMP High approved level, right? Because there are so many more controls to that. To date, we have 18 compliance standards or frameworks that we continuously audit against. It's over 500 controls. And we do that because we believe that data protection is more than just the technical controls. It's also administrative controls and showing representation of that. So in our trust center, you'll see over 500 controls we continuously audit, not once a quarter, like every week. We go through, and that percentage of evidence collection and the audit has to be 95% or greater. So it's not a trivial task. It's a lot of work. But we do that because we really do take safeguarding of data very important. And even in our SaaS, the data resides in the customer platform. And the reason that we actually have the compliance standards we do at the level we do is because if it does get into our system, we want the customer to feel we are a trusted partner.
Yeah, and it's two things. One, I mean, it's one thing to say that you have the 18 compliance standards. It's another thing to say that you have the 500 controls. And those, I think, allow people in a certain sense to kind of check the box. Great, awesome, that's terrific. You've met the compliance theater bar, so to speak. Being provocative for a second, and then there's the other sort of side of this coin, which I would argue goes back to the pragmatism we talked about earlier, which is like, okay, well, what are you really going to do? Well, we're doing this to prevent your data from being lost or stolen. These are the things that happen when X or Y or Z occurs with respect to third-party risk or exploit actors externally. And by the way, we're not naive enough as your business partner to think that data is going to be valuable if it's locked down and never capable of leaving. In order for that to be possible, we're going to give you and enable our own employees controls like Virtru and or things like TDF to enable sharing of data in a way where things are, the business can continue to move forward in a manner that isn't sacrificing the control of the data. You can do things like expire data after you've shared it with others. You can do things like revoke. But the granular nature of data control, to your point, is just one piece of the puzzle. When I think about the journey we're on at Virtru, to your point, I mean, data security is a very big and complicated ball of wax. And we are not naive enough to think that what we do is the answer to the data security problem. It's not. It being data security is much more of a journey than it is a destination. But along the journey, it's nice to be able to have conversations with folks like yourselves who do understand the bigger picture across the 18 compliance standards, the 500 controls, and uniquely value as part of that bigger picture the ability to control data that you share with others. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the 500 controls aren't kabuki theater. When you get a SOC 2 Type 2, it's been done 6 months, 9 months earlier. The idea of the continuous auditing is it shows, and including data protection controls, the frequency for which we have actually gone in and evaluated the effectiveness of the control, right? There's administrative controls and there's the physical controls. We don't allow physical media transfers. So that one's not really appropriate for us. But then even the technical controls like Virtru validating the effectiveness of it and other tools that we have in our tool suite. So my general sense is that borrowing from FedRAMP with the continuous monitoring, the continuous auditing is sort of like that reality check that you're constantly taking a look at what you're doing. And if there's things that are not hitting correct, that you're addressing them quickly. And everything that we do from an audit, we report up to a compliance committee that is comprised of business leaders. It's not just security and IT, which you'll see in some organizations. It's business from the finance. It's our engineering teams. It's, our people ops, whomever, business ops. We have everybody in that meeting because governance is that important. So even taking what we're doing and then reporting it up to the compliance committee, for instance, is yet another thing that shows that you're doing the things, the commitments. It's about trust when it comes to somebody coming to do work with you, right? Like, you want to be my vendor, I need to trust you. So you need to show them a lot of ways of how you're doing that with something like completed cakes and AI cakes and all the compliance standards. So it helps them quickly derive insights as to how serious you're taking protecting their data too. And so if you're answering questionnaires, you need to, even like I'm going off on sort of a whole bunch of things, but there's a lot to this. This is not a simple answer. The customer needs to feel like, hey, Andesite actually takes me seriously and what they provide to me, and it's substantive enough where I can make informed decisions as to whether I want to actually trust them with my data as a partner.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's so well said. I mean, trust is, like you say, data security is a complicated big ball of wax. But data security at some level is really just another word of saying, trust. Like, you can trust me with your information. I will do what's right with it. There's this element also of like, how often does someone trust sort of explicitly? This goes a little bit to like the, often rumored promised land of zero trust, but there's a difference between trusting explicitly and then trusting and verifying, or trusting with controls. And the idea that I can look at someone and choose to do business with them based on the fact that they've got really great hygiene from a compliance perspective. They have really great documentation in their trust center with respect to controls. I can see and spot a mature organization and a sophisticated CISO from a mile away. and that gives me confidence in doing business with them. And then there's sort of this idea of like, awesome, I now trust that person, but I also want to make sure that when we're doing business, there is at least some sense of sovereignty over my data because it's mine, it's not yours. I chose to share it with you today because I trust you, but I might change my mind tomorrow, in which case I want to revoke it. I mean, this idea of data sovereignty being sort of a part of the bigger puzzle is something that we obviously find, is near and dear to our heart. I'm kind of curious, as you think about sovereignty over data, how does that fit into the bigger picture?
Yeah, you definitely get a lot of that when you go into other countries, right? The sovereignty piece. Before I get to that, though, I want to address you're talking about business partnerships and why I think the CISO needs to be part of the business. In my last CISO job, I actually had a CEO of a company before they signed the contract to be a partner with our company, right? And Bias wanted to meet me.
Mhm.
And I said, okay, well, why do they want to meet me? And they go, they want to make sure you're not a jerk. So when I met them, they asked me a specific question as to why I chose certain compliance standards I did. And I talked to him about it. And he said, hey, that's great. We signed the contract right then and there. That is very important. And it's an interesting position to be in, right, as a CISO, to be on a call like that. Data sovereignty is also another one of those things where, like, there's locality restrictions, right? If I am processing data in the European Union, for instance, it can't leave. And it's not the only country that does that. So having the ability to have, to be able to build into that locality and be able to keep the data there resident is so important. When I think of data sovereignty, I think about it residing in the customer system where the customers have control of it, whether it's their SIM, whether it's a vulnerability management tool, whether it's a security data lake, whatever that is, if the data can reside there, now the conversational history, right? So that you can continue to be smart and educate yourself in an AI SOC tool, for instance, but the ultimate data resides within the customer system, that reduces the sovereignty risk to them, right? And so that's kind of the way that I think about sovereignty, and then making sure that we have the processes in place to help identify or remove data when the customer comes to us as the ultimate data controller.
Right.
So it's a process.
Right. Because and that would be a form of governance over data that when someone asks, you can do the right thing, which is take action with respect to their request.
Absolutely. Whether it's a right to be forgotten, rights portability, whatever it is. Yeah.
So I want to pull that thread a little bit more. You mentioned, meeting with the CEO and you talked a lot about business alignment and sort of pragmatism and sort of building yourself and your sort of CISO program in the spirit of like value creation for shareholders. Salespeople are often, I think, unsung heroes in a lot of companies in terms of just like doing the work that's necessary to sign the deal, acquire the customer, generate the revenue, which allows all of us to grow. What is it like to be a salesperson at Andesite partnering with you as a CISO? How do they kind of get the benefit of your unique approach?
Yeah, so I actually sit in all of the sales calls now, which is great.
That's super cool.
Yeah. So I understand what's coming, whether it's a proof of value or actually a customer. Look, in my last company, the chief revenue officer had me on speed dial. Many times I came in, I tried to build the program to help the sales team go to market strategy accelerate, right? So the completed questionnaires are just the first part of it, but there's even calls, joining calls and offering up maybe something when there's that security practitioner that's sort of picking on a point. I don't understand how you're different, or I don't understand how you're doing this. To be able to actually answer that in their terms helps out tremendously. It's a partnership again, right? I have to walk a delicate balance where, I have to be ethical from the security, compliance, and the governance that I've been built, but also help enable the business by saying, this is what we're doing to be able to solve this concern that you have. I have a very good rapport with the sales team here, and I did in my last company as well. And what I'm building is this questionnaire repository. So when they give me questions, I can return it in a day, right? That helps speed up the sales process. Build things like standard responses to RFP saying, hey, we've got this. Here's our SIG. Here's our cake. Here's our are all these compliance reports to help you get started. Understanding there's going to be various phases that we're going to go through scrutiny, whether it's RFC, we've been selected, we are selected in this annual assessment. So building the program to that from the very beginning is what I've been focused on. And then also listening when there are challenges. And I'll give you a perfect example. There's not a lot of stuff about the product in your basic knowledge base. Okay, let's pull those in there. So I worked with the product director. We pulled that stuff in. Things that are business focused, pull that stuff in. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of things like human resources and things like that, because that's all outlined in the CISO mind map. But there's that nuancy stuff you've got to build in there and then refresh it periodically, because obviously this stuff will change because the business changes so fast.
Yeah, and it just seems like the idea of the sort of CISO of the past being sort of having the luxury of being primarily focused on risk mitigation, those days I think are numbered, if not over. The CISO of today, and arguably definitely the future, has to be way more mindful of what it is to be aligned with the business, because so much of the business in the future is, if not already today, so much of the business in the future is powered by all things AI and Agentic. And we both know that the power of AI and Agentic is only as good as the data that's feeding it. And so we have to have some sense of how do we do both things simultaneously, which is put really good governance and control around sensitive data so that we can, quote unquote, feed the beast and enable the AI and Agentic value creation, but do it in a way that's not necessarily sacrificing control, security, compliance, and exposing us to unnecessary risk. Like it is a really interesting world we're living in right now with respect to all things AI, just because I think the demand for data has never been greater, and yet it seems like everyone, not just CISOs, but like salespeople, finance people, like everyone from a practical perspective, now probably more than ever understands the need for real guardrails around data, because they're experiencing it in their personal lives. They've seen hallucinations. It's real. It's like laid bare for everyone to kind of relate to. So what's your thought on the world today as we understand it from the AI perspective? Where's the world going, and what does that transition look like in terms of, data governance, data security, and all that?
Yeah, so the way I thought about it and we've implemented was looking at like the NIST AI risk management framework, ISO 42001, very AI centric, and then aligning it to our business. We don't train models, so that portion of it necessarily did not apply, but apply what makes sense. And then we actually are ISO 42001 compliant, which was awesome. And then Cloud Security Alliance, they have a new CSA AI Star Level 2. We were the third company to actually achieve that.
Oh, nice.
Pretty exciting too.
Congrats.
Thank you. The way I think about it, though, is it is a shared responsibility. So I say often that obviously there's portions of the business risk I do own, but I don't own all of it, right? It's my job to be able to identify it, explain it to the other business owner in terms that they can understand, and give recommendations on how to minimize it or reduce it or transfer it, or whatever that is, never ignore. And so having the governance around things where you're continuously auditing against that, and then pulling in a compliance committee that is AI centric, has the AI people in there as well, is important. The other thing that we've implemented, I think is very important, is we do a penetration test twice a year, but it includes an AI assessment. And the reason we do that is
is this agentic red teaming, or human?
Specifically for AI. Right now, since we don't train models, we use LLM and RAG. It's a little bit different, right? So the whole idea of the agent's a little bit different, but we work with our third party, and they're probably one of the best in the industry, in my opinion. By the way, partnerships is probably one of the most important things I would tell CISOs: get good partners. But the point is that a look at the AI from all areas of the business. Now, you mentioned earlier I'm dual role as the CIO. The other thing I've done is assembled all the expert in the organization, particularly focusing on our director of business operations. And what I'm focusing on is, are we implementing AI at Andesite that is actually enabling the business And are there any areas where we're actually creating inefficiencies, right? We want business efficiencies, but we also want to make sure if we've got inefficiencies, like maybe the same team doing two different tools and it's causing friction when you try to unify it, for instance, right? And I'm not saying we've done that. I'm saying those are things we're looking at, because what it allows you to do is have an honest conversation and ultimately build a tool of AI so that all the employees can become effective, right? The way I like to sum it up is use AI to do the toil heavy stuff, create this document format, right? And then use the big brain to solve the big brain problems, right? Instead of exhausting your mental aptitude with creating a document that you can have AI do it, right? That's just an example, but it is a unified partnership. That unified partnership, I think, is the most important thing. I don't drive it. I'm ultimately sort of overseeing it.
That concept of partnership and unification, I understand. I mean, do you agree that the unification and the strength of that partnership between the business and the, I'll say, call it CISO or CIO or risk professional, is likely to grow stronger given the rise of AI?
It has to, right? Like it has to, because I was reading, and I don't remember what company it is, but they actually took their chief operating officer and made that person the CAIO.
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
reason they did it,
I'm seeing this kind of stuff more and more, which is the point. Like, I mean, like I think the genie's out of the bottle, and it used to be sort of the world was easy 10 years ago to sort of look at a relatively narrow function of a sort of CIO. That's their job. Even a CISO reporting to the CIO or reporting to the CEO, perhaps that's their job, and the business in each of the functions. And what has transpired now with AI, and it's just this really interesting. I like the word unification and this idea of partnership. People used to talk about it would be great if we were better partners with our IT organization. Well, guess what? The best organizations in the world going forward are going to be damn good at partnering between their IT and their line of businesses, because that's what's going to be necessary for them to compete and win in a world of AI.
Absolutely. Well, that even includes like the head of people ops, right? They need to bring people
Includes everybody.
tools to be able to be efficient. So it is literally a partnership. It is a shared responsibility, and that's the way that we've sort of built it within Andesite. And I think it's actually a very successful model because it breaks down the traditional barriers. I'll give you a perfect example. My cybersecurity manager, who owns the security operations center for us, typically you'll have security champions. That's where security goes to engineers and say, you go do this. We don't do that. We literally partner with them. We're trying to solve problems together. And when you do that, the angst goes away. People want to work with you. It is a much richer environment.
Yeah, it's cliche, but I remember when the security champions concept was very popular a few years ago. But like the thing I'm actually poking at right now is like everyone's a security champion, regardless of their role. And that would have been like cute and clever maybe 5-10 years ago, but now it's like, no, I'm dead serious.
Gotcha.
Everybody's a security champion. Well, thank you so much for your time. I'm going to ask 2 questions as we get ready to wrap this up. I mean, it is super cool to have a conversation about the macro and about sort of, you as a professional and your journey through the industry as a CIO and a CISO, and helping startups kind of put their feet on the ground with respect to cyber governance and risk and all things. I guess I want to give you an opportunity just for the benefit of anyone watching, just tell me, in a couple of sentences, what's cool about Andesite and why would anyone want to partner with you guys?
Yeah, Andesite's cool from my perspective. Look, security operations center analysts, 75% of them suffer from burnout where it actually impacts their own life adversely, right? That is not a very good place to be sitting. And when you bring in tools, the tools require that you do a traditional lift and shift. We do not do that. Keep the tools where they are. We'll give you a unified place to be able to actually access them and gain some quick insights and actions. And that's all any SOC analyst wants to do, right? Mm-hmm. And we're going to do it as a secure and compliant and an AI trustworthy partner because we understand. Because when you partner with us, your data is our data. We take it seriously. And that's what we've been building in unification, the entire company, since I joined a little about 2.5 years ago. And so I think that we're on the precipice. There's a lot of AI SOC companies. They'll automate the processes, they'll automatically close things out, but there's a tremendous amount of risk to doing that. So we're not taking that approach. We're taking human in the loop is the most important thing.
In the loop or on the loop? Always in the loop.
In the loop. Like you have to make a decision about certain things, right? Like the way I think about it is, and I use this analogy all the time, network intrusion prevention system.
Yeah.
Like, well, then go ahead and start blocking it, block good traffic. And then what happened? It cost organizations lots of money. We don't want, from my perspective, I'm in the position where it's like, don't close something. I want to be the one closing it because industry standards I triage and your technology did it. How do I say reasonableness if I'm before a regulator or before the board or before a court, right? Can't do that. So our technology with human in the loop is, to me, the fundamentally most important thing that we're offering our customers. And there's no lift or shift. That just makes it a lot easier.
And the human in that loop can live a sane and effective and productive lifestyle because of the efficiencies and the clarity of the signal and the prioritization.
People just want to get things done, right? That's why AI is so popular. Yeah. So a SOC analyst just wants to be able to say, wow, I've actually accomplished something in a day other than it go frustrating. And also be able to be sort of taught and educated along the way. It'll give you decisions and say, hey, here's some recommendations based on what you're looking for. And if you agree with it, you thumb up it. If you don't, you can thumbs down. So it constantly is learning you as an operator, which is a pretty cool approach, I think. Yeah.
That is a cool approach. And it's easy to see, listening to you talk and understanding a little bit more about Andesite, how you and the program have kind of like been simpatico, not just with the need to kind of protect data and manage risk, but also build the business. So congrats on that. One last question, a little bit of a plug. These conversations are always about the professionals and the people in the community doing the hard work like you. But I am curious, if you don't mind, sort of 30 seconds on what you think is interesting and cool about Virtru.
What I love about Virtru is that the ability to work with Department of War or actually any government agency and share information, like they're super risk averse. Let's be realistic, right? The ease of use of the product is what I love about it, right? It's pretty simple. You can set up, like controls to say flag on this and remind the person. At the end of the day, I may be sending information that might be my social security number. So the ability for it to identify that and then secure it and restrict how long, if I have a contractor that contract expires in 3 months, I don't want them to have access indefinitely, right? So that level of control and granularity to protect the data of every employee at this company. We don't share customer data over that. It's not the way we do it. It stays in customer systems. Is very vital, in my opinion, right? And also, we want our government partners to feel comfortable when they're doing business with us that not only FedRAMP High compliant, so we are FedRAMP High authorized, but we also have tools like Virtru to protect their information. So when we're asking them for approval for ConMod things, we are sending it via Virtru in person.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, it has been an absolute pleasure. I very much appreciate you making the time and sharing your thoughts and expertise. And for now, let's hash it out, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, leave us a 5-star review and don't miss us the next time we hash it out. Like, follow, and subscribe to us on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, all linked below.